Hey, my name is Nate Holt. I'm 37 years old, and I restore old houses for a living. The real kind of restoration, lime mortar and true dimension lumber and arguments with historical societies in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. For 15 years, I've brought other people's 100-year-old houses back from the dead. Rich people, mostly from Charlotte and Atlanta, who buy a mountain farmhouse with wavy glass windows and want it saved properly, and can afford a man who knows how. I'm good at it. I'm good at it for a reason I don't put on the website. I grew up being evicted. That's the plainest way to say it. My mother cleaned houses in 3 counties and raised me alone, and we were good people, and we were poor the way you can be poor while working 60 hours a week, which is a math problem this country still hasn't apologized for. By my 12th birthday, we'd been put out of 5 different rentals. I know the choreography of it the way other men know baseball. The notice on the door, taped at eye level so the neighbors can read it. The landlord's truck idling at the curb. And the worst one, the one that's still in my body, the furniture on the lawn. 8 years old, watching strangers slow their cars to look at our couch sitting in the grass with my library book still on the arm, and my mother standing next to it with her chin up, doing the thing chins do when everything else has been taken. She used to clean a house out on Linden Ridge Road, a big white farmhouse with black shutters and a wraparound porch and a garden that looked like a hymn. I'd wait in the car with my homework, and some days I'd just look at that house. The way it sat there so certain of itself, and I made the only vow an 8-year-old in a borrowed car knows how to make. Someday I'd own a house, not rent one, own one. A house nobody could tape a notice to. So 15 years of restoring other people's certainty. I lived in a trailer behind my own workshop, banked like a man with a grudge because I was one, and waited, not for any house. You already know which house. The white farmhouse on Linden Ridge belonged to Miss Bertie Pemberton, who'd owned it for 60 years, who used to bring my mother iced tea on the porch like a guest instead of help, which I never forgot, and who died this past March at 91. Her only family was a nephew in Charlotte Phillip, and Philip wanted his money the way men like Philip always do, fast and without touching anything. The house went up 3 weeks after the funeral, estate sale, as its contents included, priced for speed. My agent called me at 7 a.m. I bid that afternoon, sight unseen on the inside, because I'd been seeing the outside for 29 years. We closed on a Thursday in the last week of April. I got the keys in a manila envelope from a lawyer's office in town. Philip didn't attend, signed remotely, of course he did, and I drove out Linden Ridge Road in the evening light with the windows down, 37 years old, an 8-year-old the whole way. The first wrong thing was the garden. A house empty since March should have a March garden, leggy and lost. This garden was kept. Beds turned, roses pruned to the bud, peony cages set, the walk swept. The second wrong thing was the porch, where 2 ferns hung watered and alive. And the third wrong thing was the light. A lamp, burning soft and yellow in the kitchen window, in the house I had bought, to which I held the only keys, the house that was supposed to be as empty as every promise anyone ever made my mother. I want to be honest about what I felt on that walk to the porch because I'm not proud of all of it. Squatters, I thought. 15 years of job sites, I dealt with it before, stripped copper needles in the parlor. My jaw set. I knocked hard, the way men knock on doors they own, and I heard quick footsteps and a dog's deep old-timer bark, and the porch light came on above me, and the door opened on the chain, and that is how I met Wren Davies, 4 inches of her at a time. One eye, gray as creek water. A cheekbone. Dark hair come loose from a braid. And below, at chin height, the grizzled muzzle of an ancient beagle, announcing me to the county. "You're him," she said through the gap. Not a question. Her voice was doing something I recognized from a lifetime ago, from my mother's chin, the sound of composure being held with both hands. The buyer. They said the lawyer said the new owner takes possession Friday. It's Thursday. As if a calendar could be a wall. As if one day was a thing you could stand behind. "It's my house, ma'am," I said. "I'd like to know who's in it." The chain slid. The door opened. And the story I'd written on the walk up, squatter, stripped copper, fell apart in the porch light, because the woman standing in my doorway was wearing an apron over a cardigan with a tissue tucked in the sleeve like somebody's daughter, and behind her my house, my sight unseen house, was not a dead man's estate at all. It was clean. It was loved. There was a pot on the stove. There was a dog bed by the wood box. There was a small suitcase, packed, standing by the stairs like a child waiting for a bus, and next to it, on the hall table, sat a plain brass urn with a sticky note on the lid, in shaky old lady cursive that I couldn't read from the door. "My name is Wren Davies," she said. I was Miss Birdie's caregiver. I lived in the back room, the porch room for 5 years. I took care of her until the smallest hitch, managed until March. I knew the house sold. I've been packed for a week. I want you to see that I'm packed. She moved aside so I could see the suitcase, presented it like evidence, like a woman who had learned that her word weighed nothing without exhibits, and something in my chest started hurting in a familiar place. I would have been gone already. I should have been, but she stopped. Her hands did a small helpless motion toward the window toward the dark garden. The lilacs, she said. They bloom in a week, maybe less. It's been warm. And then her composure, which I could tell had carried coffins, just folded, quiet, no scene, tears arriving like weather she'd given up arguing with. Mr. Holt, I promised her. The last week, when she was mostly gone, she'd come back for a few minutes at a time, and every time it was the same thing. When the lilacs bloom, Wren, not before. They have to be blooming or it doesn't count. Her husband proposed to her under that lilac in 1957. She wanted her ashes there, when it bloomed, and her nephew, the word came out scrubbed clean of everything she thought of him. Which told me everything she thought of him. Her nephew told the funeral home to do whatever was cheapest and never came back for her. So I have her. I've had her since March. She's on the hall table, and the lilacs bloom in a week, and I'm asking you. She pressed the tissue to her mouth, steadied, and said the words the way you'd hand someone your last dollar. Just 1 week. I'll sleep in my car at the road if you want. I'll be no trouble, you won't see me. I just can't leave her unfinished. I've finished everything else. Just 1 week. The old beagle leaned against her shin and looked up at me with the cloudy, level eyes of a dog who has decided to see how this goes before forming an opinion. And I stood on the porch of the house I had waited 29 years to own, with the deed in my truck and the keys in my fist, and I was not 37. I was 8 on a lawn, next to a couch, watching a man in a clean shirt explain to my mother that business is business. I had spent my whole life crossing the distance between that lawn and this porch, and here, on my first night as an owner, the universe, with its terrible sense of humor, had arranged for there to be a woman with a packed suitcase on the other side of my door, asking the man with the keys for time. I'd like to tell you I thought it over. There was nothing to think over. There never had been. Some doors you spend your whole life on one side of, and when you finally get to the other side, you find out the only thing you actually own is the choice of what kind of man answers. "What's in the pot?" I said. She blinked. What? On the stove. I drove 4 hours of switchbacks, and the lawyer's office had butterscotch candy and opinions. What's in the pot? Brunswick stew, she said automatically, raised right, completely lost. There's plenty. I always made too much. Miss Birdie ate like a wren. She used to say that. She thought it was hilarious. And she stopped because she just quoted a dead woman in the dead woman's kitchen doorway to the stranger who owned it now. "Miss Davies," I said, "here's how this is going to go. You're not sleeping in a car at my road. My road has bears and worse. It has Philip's lawyer. The porch room stays yours. The dog stays wherever the dog has decided. I've got 15 years of work to do on this place, and I'm told you know where everything is, including apparently dinner. And in 1 week, when those lilacs bloom, my voice did something unscheduled, and I let it. We'll keep Miss Birdie's promise. Both of us. Nobody in this house is unfinished business. Not anymore." Wren Davies stood in the hallway with her packed suitcase and her dead employer in a brass urn and her chin doing the thing my mothers used to do, and 2 tears went down it, and she said she told me the new owner would either be a good man or the pipes would burst. She said she'd arranged it with God. "Then let's eat," I said, before she arranges anything else. The Brunswick stew, for the record, was the best thing I'd eaten in a decade, and I told her so, and she looked at the compliment like it might be rigged. I learned the shape of her over that first strange weekend, the way you learn a house, by noticing where things have worn. Wren Davies was 30 years old and had spent 11 of them in other people's houses, caring for other people's dying. Her mother went when Wren was 16, cancer and Wren had nursed her through it in a rented duplex, and at 19 she'd done it again for the grandmother who took her in after. Somewhere in there, school fell away and a vocation grew up in the gap. She'd been a CNA, then private care. 4 households before Birdie. 11 years of arriving with 1 suitcase into the hardest season of a family's life, becoming indispensable, becoming beloved, and then, when the season ended, packing the suitcase while the relatives divided the furniture around her. I'm very good at leaving quietly. She told me the second night, drying dishes, saying it the way you'd list a skill on a resume, and I had to set down the bowl I was holding and look out the window at the dark for a second, because I knew that resume. I'd grown up watching my mother write it. Philip, it turned out, owed her more than manners. Bertie's last 4 months, the accounts were frozen up in the slow plumbing of probate, and Wren had worked them anyway, unpaid, full-time dementia care. The hardest nursing there is on her own savings. Because, and I quote, you don't invoice somebody for holding their hand. Philip had promised, by phone, with witnesses even, that the estate would make it right. The estate made him right, sold the house out from under her with 3 weeks' notice, and his lawyer's office had sent Wren a letter advising her that any property of the deceased in her possession should be surrendered, which is how a man like Philip says thank you. And the house. Lord, the house. I'd bought it for the bones and the vow, but I'd bought it as is sight unseen, braced for 60 years of deferred everything. What I found instead was a house that had been kept like a promise. Yes, the big stuff needed me. The roof was tired. The wiring was a museum. There was rot in the north sill I'd have to cut out like a surgeon. But everything human hands could do without money had been done. Hinges oiled. Glass glazed. The garden, that hymn of a garden, immaculate. Miss Bertie couldn't keep workmen anymore, Wren said. She'd forget who they were and call the sheriff on the roofer, so I learned. The library has books on everything, and YouTube has the rest. She'd glazed windows watching videos at 2 a.m. between Bertie's sundowning spells. She showed me her work shyly, braced for the professional to find it wanting, and I went around that house touching window putty smooth by a thumb, and what I felt was not professional at all. So we fell into it that week, the strangest and best work week of my life. I started on the north sill, and Wren turned out to be the finest laborer I've ever had, tireless, precise, unsqueamish. 11 years of lifting bodies will give you a back and a stomach both. But the real job that week, the one with the deadline, was the arbor. The lilac stood at the bottom of the garden, big as a shed, 60 years old, and over the path beside it leaned Bertie's rose arbor, the one her husband built her in 1958, the one she could see from her bedroom window. It was failing. Rot at the posts, the arch racked sideways, one bad storm from kindling, and the lilac's buds were swelling by the day, fat and purple-knuckled, a countdown you could touch. She'd want it standing, was all Wren said, and that was the whole work order. We rebuilt it together, the two of us, in 4 evenings after the day's real work. I milled new posts to match the old chamfers. She stripped and oiled every salvageable rose cane like she was bathing a patient. And here's the thing about an arbor, you cannot raise the arch alone. It takes 2 people, one on each leg, lifting in time, walking it upright slow while the joints find each other. We stood in the cold spring dusk with the whole curved top of it balanced between us, her on one side, me on the other, neither able to let go or the whole thing fell, and she looked across at me through the rose canes and said, "Together on 3, and I have built 40 houses, and nothing I ever raised felt like that arch going up." The evenings got longer at the kitchen table. She fed me the house's secrets like she was introducing family, the stare that talks. The cold spot in the parlor, Bertie insisted, was her late husband eavesdropping, the loose brick in the smokehouse where 60 years of spare keys lived. I told her things I don't tell. The lawns. The couch with my library books on it. My mother waiting in the car outside this exact house, and Bertie bringing tea out to her like she was a guest. And what that did inside an 8-year-old who was learning, eviction by eviction, what the world thought his people were worth. Wren listened the way she did everything completely. Then she said, "So when you knocked on that door Thursday and there was a woman inside with a packed suitcase." She didn't finish it. She just looked at me, gray eyes level as a spirit level, and finished it the other way. "Miss Bertie used to say houses call their people." I thought it was the dementia talking. She turned her teacup a quarter turn. "I'm not sure anymore." We found the letter on the 5th day. I was opening up the parlor mantel. The surround had pulled loose, normal old house business, and behind the pilaster, in a gap that was no accident that had been made, was a biscuit tin. Inside, a bundle of letters from the 1950s tied in ribbon, a man's wedding band, a photograph of a young Bertie laughing under a much smaller lilac, and on top of it all, in an envelope, in that same shaky cursive from the sticky note on the urn, a letter addressed, "The Yoto Hoverby's my house." I called Wren in from the garden. We read it at the kitchen table, her hand shaking too hard to hold it, so I held it, and she read over my arm, and I am going to give you Miss Bertie Pemberton in her own words, because no other words will do. If you are reading this, then Philip has sold my house before my sheets were cold, which I predicted in writing. You may check the date. I am past minding. Houses should change hands. It keeps them humble. But mind this, whoever you are. The girl comes with the garden. Her name is Wren Davies, and she has been my hands, my feet, my memory, and my daughter in every way God counts, and the law doesn't. She is owed 4 months' wages, which Philip will weasel out of, and she is owed a home, which I could not leave her because everything with my name on it passes through that boy like Tuesday. So I leave her to you, stranger, the way the old families left a garden, as a treasure that looks like a responsibility. Be good to her or get out of her way. P.S. The ring in this tin was my Walter's, and it goes to whoever marries her, which Walter and I have discussed and find hilarious. P.P.S. If you are unkind to her, expect plumbing problems. I have arranged it. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside the window, the lilac stood at the bottom of the garden, buds splitting purple at the seams, 2 days, maybe 3. Wren had both hands over her mouth, laughing and weeping in the same breath, the way you do when the dead get the last word and the last word is funny. And I sat there holding the letter, with Walter Pemberton's wedding band sitting in a biscuit tin between us like a loaded question, and I had just gotten my heart around all of it when headlights swung up the drive, gravel popping, and Banjo the beagle stood up by the wood box and produced, from some deep barrel of beagle memory, a growl. The silver Lexus parked crooked across my walk, and out of it stepped a man I'd never met and recognized instantly, the clean shirt, the phone in hand like a writ, the put-upon stride of a man arriving to deal with something. That's Philip, Wren said, and 11 years of leaving quietly went through her face at once. He came up my walk without being asked, talking before he reached the steps, the way men do when they've rehearsed in the car. Mr. Holt? Philip Pemberton. We closed remotely. Good to put a face. Listen, I'll be brief. I had to drive up from Charlotte for this, which tells you how seriously we're taking it. He gestured with the phone at the lit windows, at the dog, at the evidence of habitation. It's come to my attention that my aunt's former employee is still occupying the property. I want to apologize. Sincerely, that's a closing defect on our side, and I've got the remedy in motion. But the bigger matter, and here he lowered his voice into the registermen like in reserve for the word legal, is that certain items of the estate are unaccounted for. My aunt's jewelry, specifically her mother's ring, appraised years ago, not in the inventory. The funeral home also confirms the remains were released to Miss Davies, who had no authority. So before this becomes a sheriff's matter, I'd suggest we all be adults. She surrenders the property of the estate tonight and signs an acknowledgement, and frankly, Mr. Holt, you'd be wise to let me handle it. These caregiver situations, you'd be amazed. They embed. I want you to know I counted, not to 10. I'm not built for 10. I counted the steps between us, which was 4, and decided against all 4 of them, because behind me the screen door had opened and Wren came out onto the porch. She had the urn in her arms. You never came for her, Philip, she said. Quiet. Level. 11 years of leaving quietly, except she wasn't leaving, she was standing very still, which it turns out is the opposite. The funeral home called you 9 times. I have the dates written down, I write everything down, you'd be amazed. You told them, quote, handle it, however. So I handled it, however. I signed for your aunt because somebody on this earth had to, and she has been on the hall table of her own house since March, where she is owed a lilac, and you are not taking her to Charlotte in a Lexus to sit in a storage unit between your golf clubs. The ring, Miss Davies. He said it like a verdict. A diamond ring doesn't walk off. Either it's produced tonight, or I make the call, and good luck getting another care placement in this state with a theft investigation on your. It's in a biscuit tin, I said. Philip turned to me, thrown off his script. Behind the parlor mantel. Been there for years, I'd guess, along with your aunt's letters, her husband's wedding band, and a document in her handwriting, dated, which I have now read twice and photographed 6 times. I came down one porch step, just one, friendly as a sill beam. It's quite a document, Philip. It predicts this conversation. By name. It itemizes the 4 months of wages your family owes this woman, with her hourly rate in your aunt's hand. It states what was given to whom and why, and it characterizes you, at some length, in the prose style of a 91-year-old woman with nothing left to lose. Now, you mentioned making this a sheriff's matter, and I want to encourage that sincerely, because Sheriff Tate's mother was in Miss Bertie's bridge club for 30 years, This is a small county, and I would pay folding money to watch him read the PS out loud to you in your aunt's front yard. I let that breathe. Or, you can get back in the car, have your lawyer send Miss Davies a check for her wages certified, and this letter stays a family keepsake instead of an exhibit. As is, where is, Philip, you taught me the phrase. The porch light hummed. Banjo, sensing the tide, stopped growling and sat down with the satisfied gravity of an old judge. Philip Pemberton looked at me, and at the woman on the porch holding his aunt like the last thing she truly was, and did what men like Philip always do when the arithmetic turns. He recalculated out loud, something about no need for unpleasantness and his attorney being in touch, and he walked back down my walk, with the put-upon stride of a man who'd driven up from Charlotte for this, and the Lexus took the switchbacks faster than the county recommends. The check came 11 days later, certified. Wren stood in the kitchen holding it for a long time, 4 months of her life made legible at last, and what she said was, "I'm going to fix the roof with some of this," and I said absolutely not, and that was our first fight, and she won it, which should have told me everything about how the rest of my life was going to go. Word of the porch standoff got around the county the way these things do, which is to say completely and by Sunday. And the town, which had loved Bertie Pemberton for 60 years and had assumed, the way towns assume, that the quiet caregiver would vanish when the season ended, woke up to the fact that she hadn't and decided things. Bertie's Bridge Club appeared on a Tuesday with a coconut cake and an interrogation disguised as a visit, and left having appointed themselves Wren's grandmothers in committee. The hairdresser refused her money outright. Sheriff Tate took to driving past slow with 2 fingers off the wheel, the Blue Ridge salute, which around here is a security system. 11 years of leaving quietly, and the first town she didn't leave had quietly closed ranks around her like a hedge. But before the check, before any of that, came the morning. The 6th morning. I woke at dawn to the smell of coffee, and something else underneath it, something purple and old-fashioned and everywhere, drifting up the stairs of my house like a hymn let out of church, and I came down and found the back door open, and Wren standing at the bottom of the garden in the early gold, perfectly still, looking up. The lilac had bloomed in the night, the whole impossible 60-year cathedral of it, every cone of it lit, and the scent so thick the bees were already drunk, and the morning seemed to be arriving through it, slowed down, made ceremonial. We did it that evening, when the light went long. No clergy, no chairs. Wren wore Sunday clothes I'd never seen and carried the urn, and I'd finished the arbor's last coat of oil that afternoon so it stood straight as 1958 over the path. Banjo came on his own and sat without being told. She'd asked me to read the letter parts that were meant out loud, and I did, be good to her or get out of her way, and we laughed, both of us, wet-faced, because Bertie had built laughter into her own funeral on purpose. You could feel the engineering of it. And then Wren scattered Bertie Pemberton under the lilac her Walter had proposed beneath in 1957, in the blooming like it counted, because it bloomed, and the evening wind moved through 60 years of purple and took her. And Wren Davies stood with her empty hands at last and finished the last thing on the last list of her last household. And then, because she is who she is, she went inside and I found her in the porch room, folding, the suitcase open on the bed. 1 week, she said, not turning around. Her voice was doing the held with both hands thing from the door chain, that first night. That was the deal, and I keep deals. You've been Nate, you've been the kindest. I'll be out by. There's stew in the freezer. The labels say, and a sweater went into the case folded perfectly. 11 years of perfect quiet folding. I'm very good at leave. Don't you say it. It came out of me hoarse. She turned around. Don't you say that sentence in my house ever again? I've heard it my whole life. My mother could pack us in 90 minutes. Did you know that? 90 minutes. 5 evictions. She got fast at it, and I watched her get fast at it, and I swore on a lawn next to a couch full of library books that someday I'd own a door no one could be put out of. And I bought one. First night, 29 years of waiting, I knocked on my own front door, and the universe had put a packed suitcase on the other side of it and asked me what kind of man holds the keys. I crossed the little room and took the sweater out of the case, the world's least romantic gesture, a man holding cardigan wool like a hostage, and I didn't care. Wren. I came here to restore a house. You restored it before I ever got the keys, you and a library card and a dying woman who loved you. The sills are mine to fix. The home was already here. It was holding an urn and asking me for 1 week. Her gray eyes were brimming, level even so. "Bertie's letter," she whispered. "She left me to you like a garden. You don't have to, you never have to." "She left you a ring, too," I said. "P.S. Walter and I have discussed it." And Wren Davies, who had left 10 houses quietly, made a sound that was half laugh and half sob and all surrender, and put both arms around my neck in the porch room that was hers, is hers, will be hers, and kissed me with the lilac still coming through the window screen, and somewhere in the walls, I swear to you, the pipe stayed perfectly, approvingly silent. We were married in September, under the arbor we'd raised together on 3, with the roses Wren had oiled cane by cane climbing it like they'd been told. Walter's ring sized down by the jeweler in town who cried when she heard why. My mother came up from Gastonia and sat in the front row in the garden of the house she used to clean, as a guest, and Wren walked to me down the path past the lilac, and Banjo wore a bandana and carried nothing and was perfect. Sheriff Tate came. Philip was not invited and sent nothing, maintaining at least the consistency that was the closest thing he had to character. Wren still does care work. Her way now, hospice respite, 3 families at a time, home by supper, paid like the specialist she is, and twice a year she teaches a class at the community college called What the Books Don't Say and packs it. The porch room is her office. The labels in the freezer are in 2 handwritings now. And every May when the lilac goes off like a purple cathedral, we put 2 chairs under the arbor in the evening and pour something cold. And Wren says, "Evening, Bertie," and we sit in the scent until the bees go home. People ask me about the house, the way they ask a restorer what it cost, what it needed, whether I knew what I was getting into. And I tell them the truth. I spent 29 years thinking I was saving for a house. A door no one could tape a notice to, walls that couldn't be taken, proof, in lumber form, that the kid on the lawn ended up somewhere. And I got it. I own it. The deed's in the smokehouse brick with 60 years of spare keys. But here's what the kid on the lawn couldn't have known. What it took a packed suitcase and a brass urn and 1 impossible week of lilac time to teach me. A house is the thing you buy. A home is the thing that's already living there when you arrive, if you're lucky, asking you quietly what kind of man holds the keys. She begged me for 1 week. We're on week 190-something now. I've stopped counting the weeks. I'm counting the Mays.